Hello, I'm Lord Elemental and I'm bringing you another first impressions video from the Steam Chamber. Now today we are looking at the Showdown Effect, which is a new action platformer from Arrowhead Game Studios, which you might remember made the classic multiplayer game Magika quite a while back. Now this is another game like Magika, published by Paradox Games Interactive, or Paradox Interactive, I'm not sure which. They released some fantastic games on Steam, and the Showdown Effect is no different. It is an 8-player online action platformer with an 80s twist and plenty of classic action film one-liners. This game is currently retailing for $10 or £8 on Steam at the moment. There's not much in the way of settings, so I won't spend too much time on that stuff. There is inbuilt Twitch support, so if you like to stream your games or would like to get into that, then it makes it really simple. It's just a matter of going into the section and inputting your details like I have already. Also, just a quick mention, there is no controller support for this game. You can rebind the keys. I want to do that right now. Yeah, you can rebind the keys, but I think they've really missed a trick in not giving it controller support. You could use something like Xpadder, however I think you're going to run into problems with the way the game is controlled in terms of aiming your ranged weaponry. Now, just before I get into a game, I just briefly want to talk about loadout, store, and unlockables. Now, your loadout, as you would assume, is choosing what your character will take into battle. You can do that just by getting stuff from the real money store, which is mainly just costume items and other aesthetic items. You can't buy weapons, however you can buy weapon skins to make your weapons look like something else. In terms of new weapons, these are purchased through the unlockable system, which is bought with AC points. You can also buy new weapon skins through the unlockable section. And you can also buy new characters, and more importantly, I think you can actually buy custom rules. So at the moment, if you were to host a game, all you can choose is one of the 4 maps available or one of the 4 game modes available. You can't customize anything else unless you have unlocked any of the custom rule set options, which I've unlocked a couple, and I will show you those before going into a game. Go into a custom game, choose host, just keep that the way it is. We'll have Showdown and Downtown Beatdown. If you actually create the game, in which case people can start to join you, and then you choose your rule sets, in which case I bought 2 rule sets here. The No Heroes ability, which stops people from using their special abilities, and the 1 weapon loadout option, which means they can only take 1 weapon into the game. Now, what I really like about that is the fact that it means they could introduce any number of new rule sets in the future, which would be great to see, because I'd love to see an option of a no weapons loadout, because the game actually has environmental weapons such as fire extinguishers and wrenches and swords and shields and pizza boxes, etc. So I would like to see a no weapons loadout. That way it would be a mad rush to get the weapons on the map as quick as possible. So anyway, let's disconnect that and I will take you into a game. Now, as I mentioned earlier, there are 4 different game modes. One is your standard free-for-all, another one is your standard team deathmatch, another is one-man army, in which one person plays their character while the rest of the team chase and hunt down that one person. It's sort of like a sort of hunted / infected mode. As soon as you kill the first person to kill the person that's being hunted, then becomes hunted themselves, and they revert to their normal character, while everyone else is a henchman, and so on and so forth. And this keeps going on. Now the other mode is Expendables mode, which is a slightly asymmetrical team-based mode in which one team are the henchmen, which respawn very quickly, whereas the other team are the expendables, and each time they die, the time it takes to respawn is increased by 10 seconds. When the expendables team is completely eliminated, the round ends. You play 4 rounds, 2 as the expendables. Now, in terms of matchmaking, the game runs quite well. I've had no problems. Quite often you'll set up a game or join an existing game and it won't be full. Quite more often than not it won't be full. But the game features hot joining, so although you might start a game with only 6 players, it could quite likely be 8 players within a couple of minutes. The rounds aren't massively long, and quite an interesting feature is the last man standing feature. So after a certain amount of time in the round, it goes to last man standing, and if you die during that time, you stay dead, and the last person standing wins the last man standing title, and wins, I think, gets something in the range of 5 kills for that. So you could be losing very towards the end, and if you're that last person standing, you could completely steal the game. So it's quite interesting. It creates quite an interesting little element and an extra bit of jeopardy, but it can be a little infuriating if you've been dominating all game and then one bad death completely loses you the game. Now, moving on from matchmaking and looking at the graphics, graphically speaking, as you can see, it's a great looking game. They've gone for a really unique comic book look that sort of harkens back to old school cartoons, but it's quite modern at the same time. It's quite slick. If you look at the game menus, everything's quite old school. It's got like the CRT effect with the lines moving up and down the screen, and the slight concave or convex shape to the look of the screen. But the actual in-game graphics are quite nice. Now, as I said earlier, as I pointed out in the settings, when looking briefly at the settings, there's really not much in the way of tweaking to be done in terms of graphics, unfortunately. But the game looks great anyway. Now, sound-wise, the game is fantastic. Now, one thing that's a little grating is the menu music does repeat over and over and over again, so if you spend any length of time in the menu, you will go slowly insane, as has been the case while I've been recording this video. So I have had to turn it down. However, the music is good. It is very, very in-your-face 80s synthetic guitar music, and the sound effects for the game itself aren't bad at all. They're nothing special, but they're not bad. However, what does shine is the little sound bites, the voice acting, the little one-liners. There's some fantastic old school 80s ones in there. I was a big fan of Dutch McClone being the rip-off of Arnold Schwarzenegger, and he's got some fantastic Schwarzenegger lines in there. Everything from Kindergarten Cop to Predator to Commando. Some of my favourite Arnie lines of all time are involved there. And a lot of the characters do play on classic 80s film stereotypes, and a lot of what they say reflects that as well. Now, one thing this game has been criticised for is the controls. Now, I mentioned earlier that you cannot bind the controller to the game, which is a real shame, and like I said earlier, I do hope they change that and they look at the possibility of changing that in the future. I don't know whether that will be possible though in terms of the ranged weapons aiming, but the controls can be a little clunky. Now, a lot of people have been commenting about this. It's not just me. I'm not saying the control system is bad, it's just there's a lot going on. You've got to remember your movement, you've got to be precise with your aiming, you've got to switch between your gun and your melee weapon, you've got to be able to bandage, you've got to be able to turn on your special features, and this all works fine when it's you against one other person, but when you get 2 or 3 people on the screen at once, it all just goes to hell. The second you're under a bit of pressure, it feels like you're mashing the keyboard with Homer Simpson's hands. It just doesn't always work that well. At first I just assumed it was just me. I've never been fantastic with a keyboard and mouse. However, it does seem to be a running theme. A lot of people have been mentioning it. Also, there are a few bugs in the game. They're not game breaking. There's a bug that means every now and then the screen goes blank, but it's only for like a second at a time. It's really not worth worrying about. The only interesting bug that I've encountered, and I will be letting the developer know about this, is that sometimes it just won't let me launch the game. And if I try and launch the game through Steam, it will tell me that Steam has to be running in order to play the game, even though I am launching the game through Steam. So I don't quite know what's going on with that, but I will let the developer know. Let us know if you've encountered the same bug. But ultimately, this game is about the multiplayer experience and how well it does that. And this game does that fantastically. I mean, even the developer themselves aren't trying to say this is going to be the game that takes over your life. The developer themselves build this game as a fun game to play in between more serious gaming. This is the blow off some steam. I just fancy jumping on a game for 5 minutes. I've got a 10-minute break or something. I've been busy. I need to de-stress. I'm going to quickly start up and jump into a game, sort of multiplayer game, and it is fantastic for that. It really does lift you up. You can have some fantastic fun. It's great if you're playing with people you know, but it's just as fun if you're playing with randoms as well. The multiplayer experience is really consistent. I haven't had any problems with lag or ping as far as I'm aware. The combat itself is quite fluid. It's quite scrappy at the same time. You can mix things up a bit. Once you get a hang of the wall jumping and such, you can start jumping between walls and pulling out your machine gun and start firing and quickly switching to your weapon for close-up. There's also environmental weapons to think of. You've got large swords and large hammers that are slow to wield but will kill people in one hit, and they are my particular favourites actually. If you can time it just right, you can absolutely destroy people before they get anywhere near you, but you do have to time it just right. There are also more defensive weapons as well, such as shields, pizza boxes and such. You can use those to deflect pretty much anything fired at you, and you can use them as offensive weapon as well. Of course, they're far better as defensive weapons than they are as offensive weapons. However, there is a nice mix of weaponry in the game. Different melee weapons work differently. A lot of them are faster than others. Some are stronger than others. It's really about finding the balance of what you prefer. I do quite like the katana, however I am trying the axe at the moment. Also, in terms of the guns, I've only tried the shotgun and the machine gun so far. Both very, very different. I think ultimately the machine gun is going to win out. The shotgun is fine, but you do need to be pinpoint accurate with it. As I said earlier, you cannot fire in front or behind of the enemy. You have got to fire with the cursor on the enemy. Therefore, with only 5 rounds in a shotgun, you want to be sure you're going to hit them. With a machine gun, at least you can pepper the room, and you know you're going to hit them to a certain degree. So, bearing that in mind with the sometimes clunky control system, I would definitely recommend always going with machine gun. And like I say, only go for the shotgun if you know your accuracy is a little on the higher side. In terms of replayability, this is the sort of game that I can see people playing for quite some time. And like I say, it's a very much a drop-in, drop-out game. It looks as though, by looking at the store and the unlockables section, it looks as though they're going to be constantly updating this game, which would make sense because they did pretty much the same thing with Magika, and there were lots of updates and there were lots of spin-offs and expansions for Magika, and I would expect there are going to be updates for this. I expect there'll be new maps in the future. I don't know whether they'll charge for those maps or not. That remains to be seen. If they're looking at microtransactions in the game in terms of cosmetic items, then perhaps they'll give those maps out for free. There's no real way of telling as yet. They haven't mentioned anything about that so far. But ultimately, it's a fun little game. I mean, it's, like I said earlier, it's $10 or £8. It's something that you will spend a few hours playing. It's the sort of game that's perfect for jumping on for 10-20 minutes in the evening, or maybe jumping on for an hour or so on the weekend. As you know, they say themselves, you're not going to be spending like hours and hours on this. This is not a competitive esports game. This is something you will play in between your competitive esports gaming. If you are a Dota addict like a friend of mine, then and you need to just switch something else on for a little while, then this is the sort of game to jump into to relax, just to try and regain some sanity. Anyway, the game is out now. It's definitely worth looking at. You can find the game on Steam now. I will also link the game's website so you can keep abreast of any new information coming out. Thank you very much for watching the video. Please do like, comment and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and expect more in the future. I'll be putting out some coverage of the Arma 3 beta at some point this weekend, and hopefully we'll get some more stuff out in the next couple of days. Thank you.